A targeted excavation on one of Denmark's islands has provided a stunning discovery. The dig directly into a sacred spring revealed what appears to be Denmark's oldest iron. Let's have a look. At the spring of the Boeslunde site, the Vestskillen Museum has found two iron lances decorated with gold and another iron object sacrificed to the gods about 2,800 years ago. The spring can also be connected to a number of sacrificial finds of gold. It is actually one of the areas in Denmark where the greatest number of gold finds from the Bronze Age have been made. 10 so-called oath rings and almost 2,000 gold spirals have been previously found in the area, which the new studies show were located directly on top of and around the spring. So the purpose of the new excavation was to understand why all the gold objects were located here, and the position of the natural spring where they were sacrificed now became clearer. The bonus came in the shape of two lances, these magnificent weapons made of iron decorated with gold patterns. A dating of birch pitch from a sheath at the tip of one of the lances places the find in the period around 900 to 830 BC, so in the Bronze Age, and the dating is the oldest so far of a find containing this material in Denmark. X-ray photos show several circular gold inlays along the blade, and the best preserved lance is 47 centimeters long, the full length estimated to be around 60. So, very early iron objects and objects we have not seen before. The context is also very telling because south and east of the spring, a field of old hearths was found, so called cooking pits, previously associated with religious celebrations and rituals in the Bronze Age. This indicates repeated activities by the water. People prepared food and spent time almost in a ritualistic manner in the late Bronze Age in that sort of landscape. They had a special connection to the water sources. Also, together with the large gold offerings and the finds of 6 gold bowls at Borgbjerg Banke, the lances indicate that Boeslunde was an important religious and economic hub as well in the past. The gold-plated lances are also striking in a broader Northern European perspective, because such weapons with similar gold decoration from that time are quite unusual and unique in Northern Europe. The discovery also provides new knowledge about how the earliest iron technologies spread and about the luxurious environments of the Bronze Age where valuable metals were exchanged over long distances. The exchange of the objects would have most likely been governed by elites who tried to control what was circulating and in which area. According to the Vestskillen Museum, objects such as these from Boeslunde often had a long life before ending up in the ground. They would have been worn as weapons or jewelry before being sacrificed in or near the water in connection with a ritualistic act. When discussing the Iron Age, we should probably mention that the Iron Age reached Central Europe several hundred years before it arrived in Scandinavia. As iron became the metal of choice, the production of bronze decreased significantly. New connections between Central Europe and the Mediterranean in the late Bronze Age essentially meant that Scandinavia was more or less marginalized in a larger European context. It also means that the old networks of alliances based on the exchange of gifts and the use of bronze cease to function. However, iron usage in the Bronze Age is also attested in a couple of contexts. For example, at the site of the Diverhøy Mound. There are at least 4 episodes of substantial human activity at the site, and the first phase of the mound had been a circular rock cairn covering the remains of a late Neolithic burnt wooden structure and grave. Near the head of the interred individual was a bark container, and partially beneath the container lay a spectacular bronze axe with spiral decoration, and also 2 fibulae were discovered lying parallel on the chest of the deceased. And on the right side of the burial was found a piece of iron pyrite. Sometimes iron can even make an appearance in settlements. In Sweden, in Vistad, for example. Now, Vistad appears to be one of the very few fortified Bronze Age settlements in Scandinavia, and it has distinctive houses, rectangular ones with roofs supported by wall pillars, and a lot of interesting stuff has been discovered here, such as cooking pits, storage pits, and trash pits were quite common at the site. We also have a couple of ovens and kilns also found in the excavations, and in some of these kilns, small amounts of iron slag were found. Now, these ovens seem to have had domed roofs of a particular type, and generally speaking, the remains from Vistad closely resemble the material traits of the Lusatian culture from Eastern Europe. The excavators actually do believe that Vistad was more like an outpost of Lusatian culture, so the location of seasonal and occasional visits from Lusatian prospectors and blacksmiths in search of iron. After 500 BC, Scandinavians began to extract iron from local deposits. Both iron ores and bog iron were used to make a variety of weapons and tools. As a matter of fact, iron is quite common in Europe, available from Iberia to the Carpathian Mountains, and most of it can be obtained from the surface by open pit mining, although we also have shaft mines, for example, in the Alps, but also elsewhere. Bog iron essentially refers to thin layers of iron nodules that accumulate in certain wetlands, providing a source of ore for the smelting furnaces of Northern Europe. Concentrations of bog iron in Scandinavia was the one that sponsored the rise of powerful centers, some older, some newer, in control of this very important resource. I also mentioned earlier the 2000 small gold spirals from the Bronze Age that turned up at Boeslunde in Zealand. This is again something quite unique and represents a bit of a mystery. The spirals are up to 3 centimeters long and are made of very thin and flat gold wire and date back to about 900 to 700 BC. They might have been attached to strings that sat like small fringes on a hat or a parasol, or perhaps braided in your hair or embroidered on a suit. And some archaeologists, like Fleming Cowell, have proposed that they would have been part of the headdress or the suit of a priest king, which is definitely a very appealing theory, despite the slight risk of overinterpretation in these cases. Initially, the archaeologists from the Westschieland Museum only found a few spirals. The finder of the gold took one of them to a goldsmith who was able to confirm that this is in fact gold and not brass. And the second time, more gold spirals were discovered, which together weigh between 200 and 300 grams. And in addition, they also discovered 2 clothing pins, also gilded. The spirals were spread out in 2 concentrations. In one of them, they were in a row and in small bundles of 3 or 4. And the other one, which is particularly interesting, the spirals were gathered in a pile. Underneath, they found black flakes of something that looks like pitch that had been part of what seems to be a wooden box that would have contained the spirals. The pitch flakes have clear impressions of the surface of the wooden box on one side and also impressions of fur on the other. There is much evidence that the pitch was used to hold a fur lining on the inside of the wooden box, so it would have been a sort of clothing chest or pat box for some fine decorated suits or headgear. In conclusion, the lances that were discovered pertain to an area that contains some of the largest gold finds in the Bronze Age in Northern Europe. There are 6 large and heavy gold rings having been found on the same plot, as well as 6 golden bowls located about 500 meters away. This clearly shows that the place had a very deep significance for the people of the Bronze Age, because in the end they did choose to sacrifice a couple of kilograms of gold, so some sort of gift giving to the gods or the higher powers to ensure world order and the protection of the community, perhaps. The large and very heavy gold rings, often called oath rings, that can weigh more than half a kilo, are always found in that type of sacrificial context. So we can imagine someone of great importance in the community, a priest king perhaps, wearing a gold ring around his waist, and the gold spirals were on his cloak or his hat, and the lances also worn as a decoration. And all of it would have shone like the rays of the sun during a ceremony, and this largely fits the status of the sun as a sacred symbol in the Bronze Age. We see it almost everywhere in the rock art, for example. And it is quite logical if you think about it, because gold does shine like the sun, it is indestructible, so in a way it does contain some of the sun's power. There's likely even more treasure hidden in Boeslunde, so if you live around the area, take up your metal detector and maybe you strike gold yourself, quite literally. And you can also help the local museum conduct further research. And also, please support this channel as well, subscribe or join as members to get access to academic courses, among other things. I love ancient Nordic history and wanted to express my deepest gratitude for appreciating the channel and being part of the project. Thank you so much for watching or listening. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.